Okay.
Today we're joined by Iditarod veteran Wade Mars. Wade is a highly respected musher who has been competing in the Iditarod since he was just 18 years old, finishing in the top 10 multiple times. Though he's not racing this year, he brings a wealth of knowledge and first-hand experience to help us break down the latest race updates. We're excited to get his insight on how things are shaping up on the trail. Wade, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Before we get to our race update, can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you were involved with the Iditarod?
Yeah, I grew up in Alaska. I grew up in the same town as the Reddington family, who were the founders of the Iditarod. So I was able to get into dog mushing at a young age and be very involved in it and see it all around me. And so that's how I got into it. And then I started racing. I ran my first 2-dog race when I was 5 years old. And I ran the Iditarod for the first time at 18 and then ran it 12 times since.
Let's start with the current standings. Jesse Holmes in the lead and has made it to the checkpoint. White Mountain with Matt Hall close behind. What are your thoughts on the race for first place?
At this point in time, Jesse's in the driver's seat. It's his race to lose. We have seen crazier things. Jeff King left White Mountain 6 hours ahead of Dallas one year, and Dallas was in third place, and he ended up passing Jeff King and Ali Zirkle to win the race. So a lot can still happen in this last 100 miles or so, but right now, I think Jesse Holmes probably has it tied down for first place, and Matt Hall has a lot of work in front of him. If he wants to catch him, he's going to have to run pretty much every step of the way.
Paige Dorney Drobny is currently in third, about 25 miles behind Matt. Do you think she still has a shot of catching either of the guys?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said just now with Dallas, he was in third place when he won one of his Iditarod, so she's definitely still has a chance of winning the race. Even Paige also has a lot of speed in her team, so there's a chance that she outruns Matt Hall enough to catch him. I would find it hard to believe that she could outrun enough to catch Jesse, but there is a chance just from speed to maybe be able to catch Matt.
Weather is always a major factor in the Iditarod, and this year has been no expectation. For the sandstorm earlier in the race to changing snow conditions, how do you think the weather has impacted teams so far, and what challenges might they face as they head toward the coast?
So far in the race, the weather has had maybe not as major of a effect as it sometimes does, but there's definitely been some challenges weather-wise. We had the fresh snow outside of Eagle Island, which slowed a lot of teams down. Seemed like Jesse Holmes hit that pretty well with him being up towards the front. And then just early in the race, there was a pretty big impact from softer trails, more sugary snow, stuff like that. We haven't seen, as far as I know, really windy, bad storm conditions. So it's been pretty mild that way. But sometimes from White Mountain to Nome is the stormiest area of the whole trail. So we'll see if they run into something there or if it's nice for those guys to get into the finish line this year.
We've seen 10 mushers drop out of this race so far. That's a pretty significant number. What do you think has been the biggest factor in so many teams scratching off this?
Yeah, I mean, this is the longest Iditarod ever. So just having the extra miles makes a big difference. I think that's probably the biggest situation that we're seeing. And then we have also just being on the river can get very boring for the dogs and the mushers. So that could be an issue as well. And then on top of that, like I said, in the last question, the soft, sugary snow at the beginning of the trail could have had an effect on some of the dog teams, just not being able to stay strong enough throughout the whole race.
2 mushers were recently withdrawn from the race for falling too behind. Can you explain what factors go into that decision and how the race officials determine when a team is too far back to to safely continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest factor that goes into it is having enough help in the checkpoints. Um, I've seen a lot of different opinions about it, but I think the strongest or the biggest factor to determine whether or not they can keep going is if the Iditarod has enough pilots to be able to get to and from checkpoints. So Eagle Island is only accessible by bush plane. Koyuk, some of those other checkpoints, they don't have big airstrips, so the bush planes have to come in to get the dogs, get the volunteers, all that kind of stuff. So those guys are kind of spread thin already from the start of the Iditarod, especially this year with the new trail. There was a lot more remote checkpoints for those bush pilots to have to go in and out of. And then another thing is veterinarians. Having volunteers or villagers, locals there, checking them in and out probably isn't too big of a problem, but having enough veterinarians, a lot of those guys leave their own practices to go work on the Iditarod or their jobs, and they have people at home counting on them and needing their services as well. So those guys being able to get home on time and get back to their lives and clients is very important. So it's an unfortunate thing that happens. You know, my first Iditarod took me 15 days, and those guys would have finished faster than that, the ones that got pulled. But for this year, it was just what had to happen, unfortunately. So,
Can you give us the middle of the pack update and if there are any mushers that are standing out to you in this group?
yeah, I actually have been really enjoying watching the race because there's a lot of kind of races within races right now. We saw Ryan Reddington and Mitch Seavey come into Koyuk very close together. That'll be fun to see how that shakes out. We've seen Ryan in the past go through Elam all the way to White Mountain. I've done that a few times. It's a doable run, and if the trails are good, it can play out really well. But we saw Mitch Seavey position himself outside of Koyuk so that he can go straight to White Mountain easily. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We just saw Travis Beals and Bailey Vitello go through Koyuk almost together. So that's another one that's going to be fun to see how that plays out between them two. That's going to come down to a speed race, probably. It looks like they both have strong dog teams. They'll probably take the same amount of rest, and then whoever's team runs the fastest to gnome's going to win that little duel that's going on. And then there's always the teams that slow down a lot towards the end. We have Michelle Phillips and Mila Porcel somewhat close together with a bunch of teams pretty close behind them. And then there's a bunch of big gaps behind that. It seems like, Nick Petite sitting kind of by himself, and I think Matt Failer's sitting kind of by himself. So there's some big gaps in there, and I've always enjoyed the gaps when I'm racing. Just get to kind of relax and enjoy the ride to Nome. But for the fans, for us watching, it's really exciting to see some actual racing going on up front and in the front of top 10 there. So
How about the back of the pack? Can you provide us an update on these mushers?
yeah, the rookie of the year position is still pretty exciting. Emily Ford was leading the rookie of the year pack for quite a while, and it looks like I'm drawing a blank now. Jenny, I think, took over that lead. Dallas's driver there. So they're still racing hard for rookie of the year. So that's going to be a fun one to watch pan out as well as we get farther down the trail. And then in the very back of the pack, last time I looked, we had 4 mushers sitting in Caltag and 1 musher on the way there. So it'll be interesting to see if that musher on the way to Caltag can pull off maybe some kind of a move to get back with the pack and not get pulled out of the race as well. And then those 4 start pushing a little bit to keep up as well. So
At White Mountain, mushers take their last mandatory rest of 8 hours. What goes on during those long rests?
well, first we feed the dogs as much as they want to eat and get them comfortable and sleeping as soon as they're done eating. And then we go sleep as long as we possibly can. The mushers will probably get about 4 hours of sleep themselves. And we try to eat a big meal during that time too. That'll be, besides our other 8 and our 24, that's the longest sleep we get during the race. It's about a 4-hour sleep. And so mushers will get that 4-hour sleep. They'll get up, they'll get everything ready to go for their final push to Nome. Most people will put on fresh plastics on their sled, clean everything out except for their mandatory gear so they're as light as possible. It's a pretty hilly section, and then make the push for the last 77 miles to Nome. So
Our final segment is Wade's I Did a Picks. What do you pick to be the top 5? Who do you pick to be the top 5?
I think pretty much the leaderboard has it pretty well spelled out with Jesse, Matt, Paige, Milla, and Michelle in the top 4 for sure. And then the top 5 position is kind of open right now, depending on if somebody makes a move or not. But more than likely not, Mitch will probably hold on to that fifth position. But Ryan does have the ability to sneak up there if he decides to try to. So,
Who do you think will be Rookie of the Year?
that's a really hard one right now to see. So like I said, I was drawing a blank on that name. Let me make sure I have the right name here before I say that. But what's that? It's Emily. Emily, and who is the other rookie there?
Samantha.
Is it a man? Yeah, so it's definitely going to be one of them too. Samantha, yeah. So, since Samantha overtook Emily, I'm guessing that she's probably going to continue to gain a little bit of ground on her. But it's hard to bet between the two, but I'm going to say that Samantha probably has a push coming up here, especially if she's kind of being led by Dallas Seavey on how to run the race. They're very big on making pushes on the coast. So I would imagine he set her up for trying to do some big runs or something a little more intense on the coast here.
Who do you think will be the biggest surprise musher?
That's hard to say. Right now, I think it's pretty well spelled out. And then with the big gaps that are in the race, I think it's pretty hard for anybody to make big moves at the moment. So I think there's probably not going to be too many big surprises. I think the biggest surprises will be people that maybe don't quite make the finish line will probably be our biggest surprises if someone runs into trouble.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Special thanks to our guest, Wade Mars, for being on our show this week. If you have any questions, comments, or people you would like to hear on the show, email us at huskytalk1@gmail.com. We would like to also give credit to Hobo Jim for our intro song, the Iditarod Trail song, and our outro song, Reddington's Run.
Here's to Joe and Sampigo in the land of the midnight sun. They call this race the Iditarod Trail. To me, it's Reddington's Run. In my heart, it's Reddington's Run.